oftentimes with documentaries, of course, you're getting involved with real people in real situations, and life goes on. So I think starting with you, Marlo, I just wanted to ask, are you still in touch with the sisters, and do you have anything to tell us about their life in present day?
Yeah, first I wanted to thank you so much for having the film at the festival, and to thank all of you for coming today on this gorgeous, gorgeous day. Yeah, it's such a journey. It feels like a journey of a lifetime with somebody when you're filming them, and we're definitely still in touch with them. Juma ended up marrying, at the very beginning of the film, she's dancing with this guy with very long hair. He's kind of striking looking. She ended up marrying him and having a baby with him. And it was this really crazy story. It was like out of a Montel Williams show or something, because
Wow.
he had been dating the bar owner. And she was like 20 years older than him, and she wouldn't let him go, and he was dying for many years to kind of let go. And I think as things were kind of fizzling out with Juma and her boyfriend, and he'd been in love with Juma for years and years and years, the whole time that he was in a relationship with the bar owner. Anyway, they finally ended up together, and he got the balls to like really go after her, which I'm really happy about, actually. I think in many ways it was actually an okay thing for her to go back home. And his family, his brother runs the inn that Lotso worked at for a little while in the film. And so Juma was helping in that sort of tourist area. And so she gets to be with a lot of like Chinese from the cities and interact with them. And they're running a business together. They're running like a restaurant together, Juma and her husband. And it was going pretty well until the inn burned down a few months ago. So there's been actually a lot of tragedy, because the inn burned down and they're trying to raise money to rebuild the inn. Lotso has actually, the younger sister, has been in a pretty good relationship with her husband and sort of goes back and forth between his village and her village, and the daughter's adorable and really happy, spunky little girl. But just about a year ago, you always hear about these earthquakes hitting China and, Sichuan and how bad that was. And every time I was in their village, I was like, God, it would be so terrible if an earthquake hit here, because everything's made out of mud and like mud walls. Like it would just be a wreck. And it hit last summer. And it was terrible. And so their house was pretty much ruined. And they were living in tents given by the government for a long time, for many, many months. And right around that same time, another bad earthquake hit in another part of their province. And because everybody needed to rebuild, speculation on building materials was just nuts, and so it was so expensive to rebuild. So it hasn't been easy for them to rebuild. We've been raising a lot of money for them to help them rebuild their house. It's still not completed, and you can donate online. It's tax deductible at the MosuoSisters.com on our website. So it's been, complicated for them.
But it sounds like you've been pretty continually involved with them.
Yeah, we're really trying to use the film to raise money for them a lot now. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Andrea, how about you with these fabulous women of Kyrgyzstan?
I'm in touch with. Can you hear me? First of all, thank you so much for having us and at this beautiful venue, and thank everyone for coming. I am in touch actually with a woman who comes and tours the world and sells their work. Oftentimes, she'll stop through New York, and then she'll hit all the big sort of shows like in Santa Fe and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So. I have been in touch and with the
Santa
translators.
Fe, is that like a whole like world sort of
that
tapestry center?
Yes, the big textile shows.
Oh.
Dinara is her name. She kind of also was a cultural consultant. So we sort of, and then some of the ladies that helped me translate, and some of the filmmakers that helped me on the ground there. And we have been wanting to go now back. And show the film there, if at all possible. It was several different villages, so we'll see how that goes.
Great. And I noticed some people outside have already been admiring the rugs. We have a few of the materials out by our booth that you can take a look at and maybe talk
Is
to
your
Andrea
house covered
some
in
more.
them?
The-
They're
My
beautiful.
children ran all over them. That's why the ones that are out there, they're really quite beautiful. And I don't know, this whole notion of being in a good frame of mind when you do your work and imbuing the work with just a good vibe. They're very soft and special, and they just make you feel good when you touch them. So there's something to Kenji's process.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'll take a couple questions in a minute, but I think just the other main thing I would ask is that I know when you get involved in these projects, it really becomes something that it just engulfs you, and undertaking this a documentary, especially when you're working in a faraway land, is it's a big deal, and it's the work is really impressive that's done, and I think everybody here can admire that. But I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about your motivation going into it and the sort of planning, fundraising, things like that. But I think foremost, just like your own personal drive going into these projects.
Well, I lived in Vietnam for 2 years in the late 90s, and I was so fascinated by like the way that the modern world was colliding with the ancient world in Vietnam. And I ended up making a film about a high school exchange student who comes to the States to study. It's called Mies America. And it was kind of unfortunate because there were all these things happening in Vietnam that were so fascinating, but the film was really about America and her journey in America. And I had also worked with ethnic minorities in Vietnam. And so I think there was part of me that just like kept on yearning to go back. And so a number of years passed, and of course, the more I learned about China, it was like everything that was happening in Vietnam, but on crack, And so it was like a very selfish, personal fascination.
Yeah,
I just wanted to
well.
go and see for myself. So my producer and I, she's Taiwanese, we went and made a couple trips, exploratory trips, and looked for subjects. And I think because of my past interest in ethnic minorities, the Mosuo were just a really interesting starting point, I think.
So that came about somewhere when you started looking into China more, or did you already know about that culture?
I didn't know at the very beginning. We were really interested in young women and sort of balancing the modern world and ancient traditions. And that sounds so cliche, but and I think it just like nothing truly moved us, I think, until we really heard. It was just such
China
a
is
more
just so dense that it's like even I think a lot of Chinese people don't know about this minority group. Like
they do know. Most of them
most
do
of
know
them
about
do
that.
know?
Yeah, there is a woman named Archanamu who escaped from Lugu Lake. There weren't accessible roads until the early 90s, and she got out really early and went to a conservatory and became sort of like the Britney Spears of the Mosuo, and
really?
sort of made their traditions sound really, really provocative and like the land of free love. And that's so much of what they're reacting against.
They're a draw, a tourist draw, and
yeah, they're a really big tourist draw, and they've just been like sensationalized a lot in the Chinese.
Gotcha.
So I think some Chinese people expect something very different when they watch this film than what it was, and that was actually an issue for us because a lot of the Mosuo were very defensive about talking about their traditions. And it was, frankly, it was difficult because they feel like they had been so misrepresented that a lot of them just didn't want to talk about it in detail at all.
Andrea?
I thought it was fascinating, the whole concept of walking marriage, and I learned a lot from it, so loved it. I don't have anything near as noble to say. I'm really a narrative filmmaker, and I have a friend who was in Kyrgyzstan and said, you really should come over here and film this fast disappearing culture. She was there on a Fulbright studying them and doing kind of an oral history project. And I go there and I'm like, she's like, and bring your camera. So it was almost like making a movie backwards. I'm like, oh, okay. It was kind of just, I'll go. Really, I was trying to help her document some folk tales and for her theater pieces and for her books and translations and poetry work, oral history work. And then I did get kind of fascinated by some of the women I started talking to, and I came home and I looked at this footage and I'm like, well, now I need to try to craft this into a story. And what's worse is I went online and I found like 5 perfect little 2-minute movies on, you know, the felting and the crafting and the making a shirdak on like Lonely Planet and on people's travel websites. And so now I'm like, I can't make this movie because it's already been done 5 times in these little mini 2-minute perfect films. But the more I started listening to and working with the translators as to what all the women were saying, I decided I'm really not going to focus too much on the technique of making the work, but much more on I was interested in the stories of their lives. I found them to be really intelligent, wonderful philosophers. They taught me a lot. They moved me a lot. And I guess it's kind of an homage to them. And the same thing, I mean, the clash of their culture kind of quickly, this traditional culture, in a very meaningful way of living, because families are helping each other and staying together and know each other well and are gracious and are close, and that's really being pushed out, as you can see, with everybody needing to go somewhere far away. Like in their case, they go to Russia to become migrant workers. I mean, I guess it's the same story all over the place. But I'm happy that, I don't have a formal background in documentary filmmaking. My background is narrative filmmaking. But I thought, let me try, and I'm happy that I completed it. And I ended up getting fascinated with their folk tales and.
Yeah, no, that really makes it fun.
Yeah, they all wrote poetry. Many of them wrote their own songs. I mean, they're just good artists. So,
let me see if does anybody have a question for. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask about online access in the villages. I'd like to know whether the felt rugs are being sold online.
I think they are. I pretty much, I know I've heard that now the collectives are successful. There's, I think, several collectives. And not only do they have reps that will go out and sell work, I'm pretty sure that you can get things online. I know that, like, we just showed you a few little things that they made, but I mean, they can make a yurt tent. I mean, there's, so they're very versatile, everything from like a little like trinket tourist chachka to very beautiful, custom, full-on, gorgeous, huge rugs that, for wall or floor.
And also if the younger sister in the Mosuo village could continue her studies online at some point.
Oh, she might, but I don't think she would have the patience for it, actually. I wish she did. But she's also so busy with her child, and she's been, I didn't say this before, she's been working right in the heart of the tourist village also, with tourists a lot, and seems like, pretty happy with that.
And does the local school teach in Mosuo?
Yeah. It does. They do. Although no, I'm sorry about that. They starting in, I don't know, what is it, like first grade or something? It's all in Mandarin.
Anybody else have one? Right here.
Well, I too was amazed by the division of the modern and the traditional. That was an amazing capture. So, if I can throw in 2 questions, how do you capture, if you're not fluent in their dialect, how do you capture a dialogue that's so intimate so often? And are there 2 cameras?
There's just one camera. And yeah, I mean, the trick to that is you have to make sure in every scene that you're filming to film pauses over, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds when someone is not talking at all. And if you have those pauses, then you can connect anything pretty much. You use it as like a mask to connect disparate parts of the conversation. So that's how I shoot. usually I'm really anal about getting those long pauses on someone's face. It becomes almost as important as getting like a great expression while they're talking or a great line. But the way that I handled it with them, I mean, we really felt like we were in trouble because, I mean, we couldn't understand what they were saying. You know, my partner, who's fluent in Mandarin, couldn't understand what they were saying when we were in the village. And so the way that we handled that was that we made them very active participants in our process. We told them exactly what we were interested in. And we said, you know, please talk about these things. They were talking about them anyway, you know, and we would say, you know, how are you, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, how are you feeling about, you know, like at the first trip home, when the older sister was going to leave, how are you feeling about leaving? And younger sister, how are you feeling about staying? And we say, can you please talk about this at some point? And sometimes it was more pointed than others. Like the night before, that one, for example, every night, the night before Juma would leave home, we would say, can we please film a conversation of what the two of you are going through right now, the last night here. Other times we would tell them different things that we were interested in, and we'd be like, could you, you know, please talk about this at some point, because this is really what we want, what we're going after. And they'd say, yeah, but we have no idea if it actually happened. Or, you know, they would have this like really animated discussion during lunch, and then after lunch I would ask them, what were you talking about? And they'd be like, oh, I don't know, I don't remember what we were talking about, you know? So there were like a number of scenes that I didn't really know what the meat was until like a year and a half later when it was finally translated.
That's really fascinating. I've seen a couple of really great documentaries like this where I don't know if that somehow allows people to open up more when they know that there's a bit of a communication gap. But have you seen Summer Pasture?
Yeah, that's so good.
Like they also didn't really know what was going on most of the time, and it's just this amazing film about Tibetan nomads and their own little dialect as well.
Right.
So
I
didn't know that this was really possible to pull off, but it's just astounding.
It's nerve-wracking, but then it's also, you know, I mean, it's like a treasure hunt. It's very fun once you're actually translating it. Like the scene when Lotso, it's a delicate scene when Lotso is talking to her, you know, soon-to-be mother-in-law, and she's talking about how she's feeling sick and, you know, she doesn't know what's wrong with her. And I remember we like took her to the hospital then, but she didn't tell us she was pregnant, and so we had no idea what was going on with her, and I had no idea that that's what she was saying to this old woman, and it was so perfect as setup for her being pregnant. It was like, I mean, there were even better lines from the old woman talking about like ghosts in their bodies and stuff that we ended up not being able to use really.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was.
I like stuff like that.
I know.
But it's scary because you get these jewels, but you also, like, you ask them a question about, you know, did your grandmother teach you how to do this? And they start talking about, you know, that their grandfather had hidden, you know, gold in a cave somewhere along the Silk Road. And you get home and realize that your question wasn't answered. It's a little, you feel very vulnerable, and I was determined to have them speak their own language. They were like, I happen to speak, you know, some various Eastern European languages, and they're like, we can speak to you in Russian. I'm like, no, I want you to speak your native, you know, Kyrgyz. And so I really, you know, also the cadences and the rhythms. You ask a question and somebody could answer that in English in one sentence, but it might be several paragraphs of information. Hence, it's good that with the close-ups, because they just are very different languages. English versus Kyrgyz, and I really struggled with to subtitle or to dub, because I'm like, to really be respectful and to subtitle it would be several paragraphs of information, of text, and would Americans or English-speaking audiences read that much? But I struggled like crazy with that question, trying to figure out what to do. And you learn.
Does anybody have another one? Go ahead.
My question is for Andrea. It was a great movie. Thank you for bringing people come. Yeah, and plus I am from Kyrgyzstan, and it was great for me to see so long back then. But I was just wondering, where did you shot that? Because I was kind of looking at the neighborhood and not America.
We were.
To see which region exactly.
We went. We were in the Isikul. We were in a lot about over a week in a village called Karasu, but then we also went. We sort of drove all the way around Isikul, the lake. We went also down south a little bit. So several villages that had, wherever we had heard were some of the best or the most talented artisans. We kind of followed a trail to try to meet all of them, or the main ones in the country.
Okay, are you willing to continue working with them and doing more movies, or this was a project?
I was there for a very brief period with a really micro budget. So I would love to go back and do another project there. I found the people to be incredibly just supportive and open and wonderful to work with. I think I would do it a little differently. I would try to do a lot of spontaneous translations so that I know what's going on. Like translating it once I got home and trying to sort of almost craft it backwards was very difficult. So.
Very nice, good job. You did excellent, and the way that you collected all those different stories was really good. So basically, kind of, the whole history was put together into 30 minutes. That even like person that doesn't know what is Kyrgyzstan, because nowadays it's just 5 million people, and it's a very very small country. And whenever you say you're from Kyrgyzstan, nobody would know. But I think it was an excellently showing the culture within 30 minutes that you would understand, and plus it was in English, which is very good. Like, it's always in Russian.
Well,
I
thank
think
you.
we actually probably need to get rolling along, but we're gonna. I think our directors are going to be around for a little bit, so if you have more questions, maybe you could come up and talk to them out in the courtyard or the cafe. We'll have some more live music out there is going on right now, and again, I want to invite everybody over to the closing night at Brooklyn Grange. There is a separate ticket fee for that. I just want to let you know, since it's a different venue and it has a lot of its own expenses, but it's well worth it. There's going to be free gourmet coffee, pastries, $2 craft beers, veggies from the roof, and yeah, hope to see you there. One more film here and some music, so have a good time.